I'm Alex.
And I'm Chris. In this video, we'll be talking about diversity in China. Even though China is one country, it is the size of a continent. So let's take a closer look.
One of the easiest ways to demonstrate the immense size of China is to compare the economies of its different provinces to countries. For example, Guangdong has the highest GDP of any province, and its economy is equivalent to that of Canada, which is the 9th largest economy in the world. China's second richest province, Jiangsu, is equivalent to Russia, the world's 11th largest economy, and it just goes on. Zhejiang is equivalent to Mexico, Hunan's equivalent to the Netherlands, Fujian, China's 7th richest province, is equivalent to Saudi Arabia.
Growing up in the West, I think it's really hard to imagine the huge transformation that China has been through in the past 40 years. Ever since China opened up in 1978, the consumers here have been through a massive change. I mean, think about the first time when you used a smartphone. Now, imagine a transformation like that taking place in almost every aspect of your life. Chinese consumers have been witnessing all these amazing things for the first time, like the first fashion show taking place in Beijing, or the first fast food chain just popping up on Tiananmen Square. When Starbucks first entered China about 20 years ago, it was sort of an odd decision on their end, right? Like, the country was mainly known for drinking tea and nobody was really drinking coffee here. In 2020, Starbucks just opened their 5,000th coffee shop in mainland China, and Shanghai is the city with the highest density of coffee shops in the world. One of the ways to look at China's incredible growth is also by looking at its economy. So in 1978, when China was just about to open up, its GDP was on par with India. Over the course of the next 40 years, the economy has grown so fast, and it is estimated that by 2030, it will surpass the economy of US.
The Chinese government very famously has lifted about 800 million people out of poverty. That's gone from 756 million back in the early 2000s now to just 8 million people living below the poverty line in 2020. As well as lifting people out of poverty, we've seen a huge growth in the middle class. Back in 2012, we had 138 million people who were considered mass middle class with an income of about $9,000 to $16,000 per household. A huge number of them have now moved into the upper middle class bracket with an income of up to $34,000 per household per year. And with this increased income has come opportunity to buy things, to increase leisure time, money to spend on new experiences, new products. So in terms of where this growth is happening, we can look at this map of China and see the different tiers of cities. Now, city tiers are kind of an unofficial definition. The first tier cities are Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. Then we've got this new range of new first tier cities, where the consumers now are of a similar level, and the stores that you'll see in these cities are similar to what you might experience in the first tier cities. But these two tiers of cities, which have been the main driver of consumption for a lot of Western brands, are still just a tiny fraction of the country. If you look at this pie chart, you can see that there's a huge number of people living in lower tier cities, and they are going on their own journey towards consumerism. This is known as shachun, or the sinking market in China. The idea that the future of consumer growth in China is coming from these lower tier cities. On the map, you'll see that we're moving away from the east coast into the central parts of China. you can see actually the population of China is heavily concentrated along that east coast, with the major cities there in these big provinces that have done a lot of trade with the rest of the world. And now, as we're moving to this lower tier market, we're moving towards the west of the country, where less of the population is based. This creates some really interesting opportunities and also some interesting challenges for marketing. One of the really interesting ways that this diversity exists in China is the different levels of education. Although China has massively increased its investment in education by over 400% in the last 10 years, there are still a huge proportion of the country who their highest level of education is just junior school or high school. And this really impacts what we're doing as marketers. We really have to consider these different consumers, these different followers on our social media profiles, and how we're talking to them. So one of the things you need to consider is what types of content are you creating and for which audience? For example, if you're a brand in the travel sector, you've got to consider those kids who have come back from having studied overseas and are very familiar with traveling abroad. You maybe want to also attract some people who have traveled outside China before, but you also want to create content that helps those people who are going on their first foreign trip. This is just one of those examples of how you need to consider these different levels of education in the market here. Another very interesting thing about the education system in China is it's quite heavily skewed towards science and engineering. This heavy investment into specifically science and engineering graduates really has been great for the economy, which has grown heavily on manufacturing, and it also bodes well for the future when it comes to increased research and innovation in China. It also can be a challenge for us in marketing, because so many of the people that are graduating are actually coming qualified in a way that's not necessarily ideal for running a marketing team, and we'll be covering that in a later chapter. So we've taken a really high-level look at the diversity in China, right from city tiers, the economics, to levels of education.
In the next video, I'll be talking about some of the consumer profiles in China.
Thank you for watching this video, which is part of our series covering KAWO's ultimate guide to China social media marketing in 2022. You can find the full guide at KAWO.com/guide. If you want to learn more about KAWO and our platform that helps international brands manage their social media in China, then you can head to KAWO.com, where you can also request a demo of our platform. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.